So now, if we want to try and look at a broader policy, a policy that doesn't have that sort of dramatic action hero scenario to it, but that tries to work the numbers in such a way that a sort of program of systematic torturing of selected individuals will ultimately result in a significantly greater amount of good being created through the reduction of terrorism and the saving of lives. First question we'll want to ask, if we're going to try and extrapolate from the ticking bomb case that way, is to look and see if torture really does look like it's the tool in that scenario. So remember now, we're not looking at the ticking bomb case. It's not 24 hours until a nuclear device goes off in downtown Manhattan and we have the person who was integral in the planning and nobody else knows it, and they have all the information, and the only way we're going to get out of them is torturing them, and we do it and they survive. We're not playing that scenario anymore, but we want to come up with something that might generate a similar intuition. So we have to look at more ordinary cases and ask, is torture really the interrogation technique of choice in those situations? Will it be the way to go? And the case for that looks pretty bad. To start, there are very few experts that believe that torture generates reliable intelligence at all. In fact, most intelligence experts argue that other techniques prove much more effective in getting subjects to provide accurate intelligence. And if you ask intelligence experts about this, right, what they'll tell you about torture is, you can get people to talk when you torture them. You almost invariably get people to talk. Sooner or later, they will talk. The problem is, when they talk, they'll tell you anything they think you want to hear to get you to stop. They're talking because they don't want to be in pain anymore. They're talking because they're scared to death, right? And they want to get some respite. And so if you're asking them where that nuclear device is in downtown Manhattan, but you don't know, to get them to stop torturing you, you'll tell them something. And you'll tell them something even though they can find out later that it's not true, because they are waterboarding you for the 20th time in a row now. And you're trying to get them to stop now. You're not planning out your tactics for 4 days from now. So generally speaking, intelligence experts say people will talk as a result of torture, but you're not going to get reliable intelligence out of them. And in fact, when they went back and reviewed how good intelligence was gathered from suspects during this period, from roughly 2001 to up to 2008-9, what they discovered was almost all the really good intelligence was, no, let me rephrase that. They discovered the good intelligence was gotten through other techniques, that the torture didn't actually yield a whole bunch of actionable intelligence. So even Abu Zubaydah, right, getting waterboarded up, you get people getting waterboarded up to the 2 and 3 digits worth, and what they discovered was all the actionable intelligence they got out of those people they got before that. They didn't get it as a result of that waterboarding. They didn't get it as a result of that torture. So when you sort of look at the assessment of the effectiveness of torture as an interrogation technique, then if torture provides some magic bullet that achieves results that are otherwise unattainable by other methods, so that we have some special need to put torture into the playbook in a more general way across a wide set of circumstances and not just this ticking bomb scenario, then we'd expect intelligence professionals, lots of them, the majority of them, to advocate it, to be able to give us examples of how it produced actionable intelligence. And in fact, you don't find them doing that at all. And so if we want to try and broaden out our scope, try and justify the use of torture outside of these hypothetical ticking bomb scenarios, torture doesn't look like a good interrogation technique generally. That torture's the favorite technique of repressive regimes because people will tell you anything you want them to tell you if you torture them. So North Vietnam tortured American POWs. They didn't torture them to get them to admit things that they agreed to about the U.S. involvement in the war being illegal or that they'd committed war crimes. A lot of the people who confessed to these things didn't believe any of that stuff, but they didn't want to be tortured anymore. And that's one of the things that torture effectively does. It gets you to say things that you don't believe. It gets you to act in ways that you wouldn't normally do. It breaks you down. It dehumanizes you. But it doesn't necessarily turn you into a reliable conduit of information. And, we can get some sense of that just by looking at some numbers from that period of U.S. active, aggressive interrogation. So according to Amnesty International, during the period of the invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, from roughly 2001 to 2004, the U.S. military and security operations detained about 50,000 people in some 25 detention facilities in Afghanistan and 17 in Iraq that were operated by U.S. forces. So U.S. agents or people employed by the U.S. government indirectly who detained these people and kept them in their facilities. That group of people. Now, it's unclear exactly how many of them were tortured. Lots, though. But it is clear that the practice didn't yield vast amounts of actionable intelligence. So, for instance, bin Laden wasn't found during this period. Likewise, in 2008, when Barack Obama was elected president, the United States held about 500 detainees in Guantanamo. And it was pretty widely admitted that, generally speaking, none of them had any actionable intelligence. And the Obama administration struggled for the next 8 years to try and get some of these people released. What was the problem? They weren't going to get the information out of them. Well, a lot of them had been tortured. A lot had been kidnapped and taken from their country. And so the fear was if they released them, if they weren't terrorists before, no, they'll be terrorists now. If they weren't directed specifically at the U.S., they will be now. And so there's still people in Guantanamo, still held, still no trials, no hope for convicting them, but they don't have any real plausible ways to be released either. So that practice, when we look at it as it happened during that period, that doesn't seem to bolster the case for more widespread torture practices as a means of slowly but surely reducing terrorism. And in fact, after 2008, up and as far as I know until now, the United States has explicitly forbade U.S. agents to torture people. But we haven't seen a dramatic spike in terrorism as a result of that. There hasn't been all these plots that could have been foiled otherwise. And so again, if we think torture is that missing piece that's going to make the world so much safer, we would expect when we stop torturing, terrorism, successful terrorism goes up. But that isn't what we saw.